For this edition of Cecil Recommends, I thought I would go with a theme, and that theme being awesome foreign movies that were remade into shitty Hollywood productions. First up is a 2007 Spanish film called Rec. Now, this was remade a year later into the movie Quarantine, and Quarantine was terrible. Quarantine was almost a shot-for-shot remake, but the thing was, even though it was almost identical, everything that was good about the original, they sucked and threw out the window with the remake. It didn't have any of the tension, it didn't have any of the scares, and even though they were doing an almost carbon copy of the whole thing, they chickened out at the end and changed it. I don't want to say, in case you haven't seen it, but in the original version in Rec, the reason for the zombie outbreak was pretty unique and kind of controversial. So when they took it and remade it into Quarantine, they sanitized the ending and made it stupid. It was like they had the balls to copy the movie, but completely chickened out at the end because they probably just didn't want to deal with the controversy. The other thing that pissed me off was that Rec was supposed to get a release on DVD in the US prior to Quarantine being released in theaters, and the production house didn't want Rec to hit DVD before Quarantine hit theaters because they were afraid that it would hurt sales. So what they did was, through some dickery, they had the movie delayed, so Rec wasn't released on DVD in the US until after Quarantine was released in theaters. So if you haven't seen it, check out Rec. If you saw Quarantine and you thought it sucked, because it did, see Rec and you'll see the movie the way that it was supposed to be seen. Next up is a 2004 Thailand movie called Shudder. Over the 2000s, we had a lot of the J-horror style of ghost movies, and this one was a little bit different. Probably the closest thing I can equate it to would be Fatal Frame. That's not a bad thing, because Fatal Frame is one of the few video games out there that is really, really scary. The movie was remade in 2008, and they kept the name Shudder, but it just was empty. It didn't have any of the atmosphere that the original had. All the ghosts were boo scares, and it just sucked. One of the things that's sad is that more people have probably seen the remake than the original, and the remake kept the ending of the original. Of course, they blew it and they did it stupid. The original, the ending, it's not a twist, but it is a reveal that completely sucker punches you. I thought it was a fantastic way to end the movie, and it explained something that had been going on within the movie. And when they remade it, it was like, oh yeah, that thing, and it just sucked. A Tale of Two Sisters is a 2003 movie from South Korea. It is a horror movie, but it's a horror movie that has a mixture of mystery and drama in there. The acting in the movie is just so good. The characters were really well developed, and it was interesting. It was remade in 2009 as The Uninvited, and again, mystery and drama and horror thrown out the window for bad dialogue, and of course, boo scares. One Missed Call is a 2003 Japanese horror film from legendary director Takashi Miike, and they remade it in 2008 and completely missed the point. When Takashi Miike made this movie, he made it almost as a spoof on movies like The Ring and The Grudge, because those movies at the time were really, really popular in Japan. Takashi Miike has always made very, very unusual films. Movies like Audition, Ichi the Killer, Ezo, and they're far out in left field. And One Missed Call was an attempt for him to do what he considered a mainstream movie, but it still was very different. It had a few good twists in there, but still at its heart, it was poking fun at the current state of J-horror. Now, the remake came in, and I think what happened at the time was this was a few years after the American version of The Ring, and that made a shit ton of money, and then they remade The Grudge, and that made a shit ton of money. So a bunch of Hollywood producers were out there, and they were buying up the rights to everything that they could. Every J-horror, every South Korean horror, everything that they could get their hands on. A lot of them, I don't even think that they knew what they were getting into. They were just buying and they were like, fuck it, we'll buy the rights and worry about it and change it if we need to. I mean, somebody along the line bought the rights to Suicide Club. If you know anything about that movie, there is no possible way that any Hollywood studio would be able to remake that, not only remake it and do it justice, but there's no way that they would have the balls to remake that and release it in the US. It just would never happen. They bought the rights to One Missed Call, thinking that it was another J-horror. And when they remade it as typical J-horror. It was bland, it was mediocre, again, boo scares, and they couldn't have botched the ending more. They completely missed the point of the original ending, and they just made it more garbage. And the last movie I'm going to recommend this week is a movie called Taxi. Taxi was a 1998 French film that was written by Luc Besson, and it has by far some of the best car chases ever put to film. It is amazing what they were able to do. It's a really, really cool flick, and it's entertaining. The story is a little bit thin, but it doesn't matter because this is a case of where, much like a lot of kung fu movies, the story is just there to stitch together the fight scenes. And with Taxi, the story is just there to stitch together the car chases. It was remade in 2004 with Jimmy Fallon and Queen Latifah, and it sucked. It was awful. Fallon used to bother me, but lately with his talk show, I've actually kind of grown to like the guy a bit. I don't have a problem with Queen Latifah, aside from the fact that every single movie that she's in, she's the lady. Bringing Down the House and Hairspray, every movie, they always have that moment.
Buckle up for safety, mother.
This is a piece of shit. So since this time it was movies where the originals were better than the remakes, I think what I'm going to do is for next time, I'll do movies where the remake is better than the original. And that one might take me a little while because there's only like 2 movies I can think of off the top of my head where the remake is better than the original. But there is a laundry list of awesome originals and shitty remakes. I think it can be done. I think I can come up with at least 5. So I'll see you next time.